Hello, my name is Brex10, and welcome to my review of Scorn, an H.R. Giger-inspired survival horror game that I looked forward to for many years and personally feel a little torn on. But I'll get to that later. First, if you look on the screen right now, you'll see that I've been doing some research, trying to get a better understanding of the game than I could have on my own. And what I've found is pretty interesting. For the most part, people seem to be able to agree on a lot of things. I'm not going to go super into detail about all of this stuff because I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm going to try and summarize what I've found from these videos, and some of my own thoughts from having been a fan of Giger's work since childhood, having grown up with Ridley Scott and Dan O'Bannon's Alien franchise being some of my favorite movies. So let's get into it. First off, something I should probably mention before getting into anything else is the person you play as at the start of the game and the person you play as after falling from the Genesis wall are two different people, and the first person ends up being mutated by the white substance he got covered in after destroying the machine and becomes the parasite, which is why the parasite has the piston gun when he latches to you. First, let's talk about the world of Scorn. I was originally going to try and describe what's going on with the actual world of Scorn, but I've decided there's way too much to talk about regarding that, and it's all just speculation, and it would take me hours to try to explain it, and there's no way I could simplify it without it sounding like incoherent rambling. So if you're interested in that, go check out some of the other people's videos, but all I'm going to mention is a few things that are important to the rest of what I'm going to say. So, these guys, which we juiced to power the shells at the end, are called homunculi. They aren't babies, they're just small and look like MODOK from Marvel. The thing they pilot is called a cyborg, and it's something they themselves invented, because they are just smart like that, apparently. These guys, with the bone collars on their neck, seem to be the default humanoid inhabitant of this world, and they are what we play as throughout most of the game. These guys, without the bone collars and having third eyes, are believed to be an advanced form of those other humanoids due to genetic experimentation. These little guys, like the one we scooped in episode 1, are called mold men, because they are people made in a mold used as resources. They were described in the art book as living batteries. So were the homunculi, but in a slightly different way. The flesh mama in the pit is called the Pit Queen. Actually, no, it's called the Crater Queen, and the place is called the Crater. I just didn't want to record this entire video, or at least this huge part of the video, replacing every single time I say pit with crater, so I'm going to put this here. Yeah, sorry about that. And she is the origin of the pit creatures, which are what we fight throughout the game. The big citadel we see at the end is called Polis. The world is almost definitely a post-apocalypse, with the people of the world losing control of their experiments and then having to either die off or flee that portal at the end, or something. It's really all still rather uncertain. That being said, though, let's get into the more metaphorical symbolism of the game. As this game is almost more of an interactive art piece than it is a game, it is meant to be interpreted by the viewer in many different ways. Of course, the artist probably has an intended interpretation, but a lot of symbolic art is more than just what the creator had in mind. However, the metaphorical interpretation seems to be a little bit more solid than our attempts at figuring out the actual world. A lot of people have been coming to the same general conclusion, though some do seem to have more unique takes, and I myself have a slightly different conclusion than others, but we'll get to those later. The general consensus, however, seems to be that the game is a metaphor for stillbirth. You are the baby going through labor, with the world you are going through seeming to be the body of your mother, especially considering the portal at the end of the game that we fail to go through is shaped quite a lot like female genitalia. That's because it is quite literally the exit from your mother's body, and you die before you make it out. So the stillbirth symbolism there is pretty obvious. There is tons of imagery around the game that makes one think of mothers, pregnancy, and reproduction, especially at the end, with all the murals of people mating, and it's also likely to be a stillbirth due to the complications of a conjoined twin, the parasite that is attached to you being representative of a conjoined twin that leeches off of you. My theory, however, is that it's actually more about post-mortem birth. Not only are you and your conjoined twin failing to be born, but the entire time you're trying to get born from a corpse, in the process scientifically called post-mortem fetal extrusion. But even that fails. If you look around you throughout the game, yes, the world is made of organic matter, but the world certainly doesn't seem alive, healthy, and thriving. In fact, the world does seem to be decaying, with the only real life in it being the Pit Queen and her little creatures that spawn from her. If we ignore one mold man and a couple dormant homunculi, which does seem in this world more to be an invasive infection than an intentional and helpful part of it. Maybe even a cancerous growth taking over the rest of the body. So basically, your pregnant mother dies due to presumably cancer, and you and your parasitic conjoined twin struggle to make it out alive, but complications with that twin cause you to fail. I even think that bit where your brain gets connected to the bit of brain matter on the roof at the end of the game could be representative of you gaining consciousness, only to lose it very soon after. Another theory I want to mention is one by a YouTuber named DJ Peach Cobbler. He actually took a very different viewpoint, one I actually really like, though that may be in no small part because anything different and new was a refreshing change of pace in my research. Also, his video is just very fun to watch. Go check it out. I'm not going to do it justice, but I'll try and simplify it. He compares what we, the player, go through in the game to what beef cattle experience going through their life. They are born in this cold, hard, unknown environment, and go through it never really knowing what's going on. What is this place? Why is it here? What is their purpose here? And then, without ever having gotten any answers, they die. This could even be a metaphor for all of life, even human life. We are born not having asked to be born into a world we have to fight to survive in, and struggle to find purpose in, only to die having never really found the answers. Similar to cattle, born and raised for no reason other than to die having never understood why. Now, recently, another video came out, not directly related to Scorn, but related to Giger, and that is a video by the channel Roanoke Gaming, which goes over the first 3 movies in the Species franchise, the creature in which was designed by H.R. Giger, and it made me realize something about Giger's art, which I had noticed but not really thought about previously, and that is the repeated theme of reproduction being depicted as a harsh, brutal, emotionless, and violent mechanism for survival. It almost seems like what most see as the miracle of life, he saw almost as the nightmare of survival. One artwork in particular, named Birth Machine, which you can see on screen now, being a good example of this. Take a look at it. It's the inner working of a gun, but the bullets are people, and it is named Birth Machine. It seems like he's saying that people are fired out into this world in a violent manner. Them being depicted as bullets, something that takes life, makes me think it implies that people are sent into the world only to cause more damage to it. And then look at other things Giger has made or inspired. The xenomorphs from Alien, which use facehuggers to forcefully turn other creatures into the mothers of their species, and chestbursters killing their mother in their birth to grow and become killing machines that only continue that cycle. Then you have the creatures from the Species series, which seem to have their primary goal being to reproduce with other creatures, being picky and choosy about the genetics, killing anything with unfavorable genetic traits and breeding with those with favorable ones, then killing their mate before delivering their young. The females of this species who are already violent in their means of reproduction, also have special spines on their backs which can grow to kill anything that would try to force itself onto them, like the males of its own species, which is shown in the second movie. And then you have Scorn, which we have already mostly discussed. And another YouTuber I would like to mention, and this will be the last thing I bring up that has to do with other people's videos, is a YouTuber named Night Owl. This guy has made 2 Scorn videos, and they are both fantastic. And just in general, this man's videos are great. They have so much style and are really good deep dive reviews. He definitely has a fan in me now. But unfortunately, both of his Scorn videos are from before the game's released, and his most recent video, on Elden Ring, also before that game's release, was from over a year ago. So, for a moment, I thought it was a dead channel, but fortunately, I checked his community tab, and he has a post from a month ago saying he is working on another Scorn video, a post-release one this time. So I'm certainly looking forward to that, and would recommend anyone watching this to go check that out too when it comes out. Finally, let's get on to the actual gameplay and my thoughts on it. As I said at the start of the video, I am torn on Scorn. I thoroughly enjoyed my time playing it, but at the end I was just left unsatisfied and wanting more. I was kind of left there thinking, that's it? Okay, That might be in part because going into it I thought it was being backed and made by an experienced developer. I didn't know this was a Kickstarter-funded indie game from a first-time developer named Ebb Software. And you might be thinking, hey, Brex, in the first video you said that you've been looking forward to this game since 2016. How do you know so little about it? And the reason is that Scorn is one of those games that I specifically chose not to follow because I wanted to go into it completely blind. So after the teaser trailer in 2016, I just went, yeah, I'm gonna play that game. And never looked into it beyond that. Though I kinda wish I had, because maybe my expectations might have been a bit more realistic. That being said, however, I've done my research now, and while a lot of stuff about this game's development is unknown, I must say it seems to me this game isn't everything the developers wanted it to be. Especially with the art book in mind, which had about twice as many locations in it as the game actually had. However, that doesn't really make sense, because Scorn was apparently initially going to be part 1 of 2. But it was said when the game was released that it is both parts in one, which makes me think the developers decided to condense both parts and cut a lot out. Maybe they felt their gameplay could not support a game that was twice as long. Personally, I would have been fine with that, especially if it gave me more to go off of as far as figuring out what the game was about, but I can see why they might have thought that. A lot of people did have complaints about the gameplay. I myself wasn't super fond of the combat, especially in that cyborg boss fight, and some people, even with this game's short length, have been calling it tedious and boring, saying the puzzles feel more like busy work than engaging gameplay. I personally disagree with these statements, but for the most part, I understand them. And back on the topic of stuff getting cut out, one thing you've been seeing in the trailer I've been playing in the background, and something Night Owl noticed about it in his videos, is that in the trailer, the Scorn protagonist seems to be wearing some kind of armor, which led him to think that you would slowly collect armor throughout the game, making you more resistant to damage. This is another thing that seems to have been cut, and had the game been longer, having a wider range of enemies, I could see armor being a mechanic. I theorize that the reason that was cut is part of the merging of Part 1 and 2 into one game. After spending hours trying to figure out what the game was about and speculating about it, at this point all I'm thinking about is what was lost? What are we missing because it got cut out? What was the exact reason they decided to merge the parts only to end up making a game that still felt incomplete? Is this the game the developers wanted it to be, or did they have to settle and just put the game out there? Now, I do want to mention the other artists who inspired Scorn. First off, the creators themselves had mentioned an artist named Szyslaw Beksinski. whose name I probably just butchered, but we'll have on screen, and we'll play a little audio version of here.
Zdzisław Beksiński.
And I've never heard of him before myself, but looking through his works, I can definitely see the inspiration. One thing I did notice and want to mention is while Scorn was inspired by Giger, it seemed much more fleshy, whereas Giger's work has always seemed more cold and lifeless to me, like they were murals etched in smooth stone rather than being made or consisting of anything fleshy itself. So maybe that is because of this artist's inspiration, and looking at this piece on screen in particular, it almost looks exactly like one of the pit creatures in the game. Moving on to the last artist I want to mention is David Cronenberg, who is a prominent figure in horror films for his practical effects work on movies like 1982's The Thing and 1986's The Fly featuring Jeff Goldblum. On top of that, many people have mentioned the film Existence, which Cronenberg had directed, wrote, and produced, because of its gun, which looks like it would fit very well in Scorn. Now, I have not watched Existence, but I don't think a deeper understanding of the movie is needed in seeing why people have been saying that. I myself, when playing Scorn, keep thinking of the fleshy covered hallways of Doom 2016, which made me kinda wish for a more action-based game inspired by Giger. After thinking about those other great artists, I want to go back to Giger to send this video off. Giger is not one of those artists who were underappreciated in their time. He was well known and well respected, having worked on movies like Alien, having made many album covers for rock and metal bands, and having made the iconic mic stand used by Jonathan Davis, the lead singer of Korn. And all of that is on top of works he made entirely on his own. But the impact and prominence of legendary artists seems usually to grow even larger after their deaths. And something I want to leave you with is that Scorn still only marks the beginning of H.R. Giger-inspired media. Right now, if you go on a website called ArtStation and type in the name Giger, you're going to see so much amazing artwork inspired by him. Even when devoid of all intentionally artistic symbolism, his aesthetic is just beautiful. And I think it is safe to say that he has left his imprint on the world. He will not be forgotten, and this is not the last we will see of his artistic legacy.